Today I'm here at Balgony Castle in Fife, Scotland, and I'm going to be talking to Stuart Morris of Balgony, and he's going to tell us about the Tay Bridge disaster. Can you tell us about the Tay Bridge disaster?
Well, the Tay Bridge disaster has always been in my family. One of the victims was my great-great-great-grandmother, and also her granddaughter were killed in the disaster. So it's always been spoken about in the family. And like most people, I presumed that there was a memorial for the victims. But many years ago I discovered there is no memorial for the victims at all. There are two small memorials for the loss of the bridge, one on each side of the Tay, but nothing for the victims. And about 10 years ago I started thinking, well, it's about time there was a memorial. And over the years I've been mulling it over in my mind, and I've approached one or two people in the past, and most people have been surprised that there isn't a memorial, and yes, it's about time there was one, but no one else seemed to be interested in actually starting the whole process running. So last year was the 130th anniversary of the disaster, and I decided, well, if no one else is going to do it, I had better do it. So I wrote to the editor of one of the local newspapers, and he put a little piece in the newspaper, and one or two other newspapers picked that up, and one or two people contacted me, and particularly one of the councillors in Dundee, who's on the side of Dundee that has the bridge, and well, we had a meeting in Dundee, and then from that we got one or two other people interested, and we've now formed a trust, the Tay Rail Bridge Disaster Memorial Trust, and we have the committee, and that trust is hopefully going to push forward, raise funds, and we shall finally have a memorial erected to the victims, and that memorial will also include the names, ages and places of birth of all the victims.
Could you tell us briefly what happened on that day of the Tay Bridge rail disaster?
The disaster happened on Sunday, the 28th of December, 1879. It was the last train of the day crossing the bridge. There was a huge storm, and as the train crossed the bridge, it got to halfway, and at that point there was a huge wind suddenly came up, and it's thought that the wind forced the train off the rails, hit the cast iron bridge, and the whole centre of the bridge just went down into the water, and everyone on board was killed. That's 59 people, including 4 staff.
Shocking.
Yes. It was the greatest storm that had ever happened in Dundee in anyone's memory. It was so powerful that the wind actually moved 4 railway wagons on the mainland, next to the sheds. It moved 4 railway wagons fully laden with coal 400 yards. That's a very strong wind. And it also took the roof of part of the station, and that was ended up in one of the streets. Well, there are several stories about the disaster. The youngest victim, little Bella Niche, was 4 3/4. She was very young. My 3 times great-grandmother was in the disaster along with her 14-year-old granddaughter. They were visiting a relative in Leuchars, and they were on the way back when it was involved in the disaster. But there should have been a 3rd member of the family involved. But being a little boy, typical little boy, he had been naughty, and his mother had sent him to his room. He wasn't allowed to go and see his uncle, so that actually saved his life. So there are times when being naughty can be quite good. There's another. The last victim to actually be found was a chap called Joseph Anderson, and he was found 4 months after the disaster. That's in April of 1880, and his body was found off the coast at Wick, which is a considerable distance, and that's north, whereas the current in the North Sea is actually heading south. So we're not entirely sure how his body managed to get that far up. And then there was a poor chap from Cheltenham, and he was actually on the wrong train. He knew he was heading north, knew that Dundee was on the way, so he decided he'll just get that train. And he was renowned as a swimmer, And when his body was recovered, it was minus his jacket, and his waistcoat was half unbuttoned, as if he was stripping off to try and swim for the edge. But obviously, the depths of winter, pitch black, and the water must have been very cold, and the shock must have just been too much, and he just didn't have the energy to save himself.
How would you like the people to help in this fundraising? What would you appeal to people?
Well, at the moment, we're happy to receive donations for the memorial. We're actually planning 2 memorials. As I said earlier, there are 2 small memorials to the loss of the bridge, one on each side of the Forth, one on each side of the Tay. So my idea is to have 2 memorials for the victims, one on each side of the Tay. But we'll have the main one in Dundee, and that will be the one that lists all the names and ages and places of birth. Whereas the one on the Fife side will be to commemorate the lives of the victims, as that was the last part of the mainland when they were still alive. And it also helps bring both communities together.
I understand the R.T. Burns Club is involved with this project as well.
That's right. The R.T. Burns Club has taken the Memorial Trust on board as one of its pet charities, and they're helping to certainly do the musical reception that we've got here in March. That's what they're planning. The R.T. Burns Club is a web-based club for everything to do with Robert Burns, for Burns enthusiasts, and they raise money for various charities, usually connected with Burns or Scotland, and they hold various events through the year.
This is Faruqi Muskwati for Channel 5, Balgownie Castle in Fife.